They said Africa would be happy just to show up. 9 teams, 9 flags, 9 nations told for decades that 5 slots were enough, that this was as far as the continent could go. And then the whistle blew in Group H, and a nation of 500,000 people, smaller than a mid-sized American city, walked onto the pitch against 2-time world champions Uruguay and refused to lose. Cape Verde, a country most casual fans couldn't find on a map 3 years ago. Their goalkeeper, Vozinha, has become the single most talked about player of this tournament, not because of a transfer fee, not because of a boot deal, but because of what his hands have done under the crossbar in the biggest moments of his life. A 2-2 draw with Uruguay in Miami wasn't just a result, it was a statement. And it means the Blue Sharks are through to the knockout stage in their very first World Cup appearance in history. This is the story nobody scripted, and it's only getting started. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand what Africa has spent nearly a century fighting to earn. In 1934, Egypt traveled to Italy as the continent's first ever World Cup representative and were eliminated in the very first round. For the next 38 years, Africa didn't appear at a World Cup again, not because the talent wasn't there, because the door was barely open. When African nations were finally offered a place in 1966, it came with an insult attached: half a spot, shared through a playoff against Asia. CAF's response was to withdraw every single African nation from qualifying in protest. It's remembered in football history as the disgrace of Gihon, and it forced FIFA to change the rules. But change came slowly. For decades, 5 slots were the ceiling. 5 for 54 football associations, while Europe alone set more than double that number. Roger Milla changed the emotional temperature of that fight in 1990, when Cameroon shocked defending champions Argentina in the opening match, and then danced his way into football folklore, becoming the first African team to reach the quarterfinals. Senegal repeated the shock against France in 2002. Ghana came within a stoppage-time penalty of the semifinals in 2010, the year South Africa became the first African nation to host the tournament. And then, in Qatar 2022, Morocco did what Pelé once predicted an African team would eventually do. They didn't just compete, they went all the way to the semifinal. The first African, first Arab nation ever to do it. Now, in 2026, Africa doesn't have 5 seats at the table. It has 9, the single largest African representation in World Cup history, a direct result of FIFA's expansion to 48 teams. And the numbers alone tell you this is a different level of continental strength. 9 separate qualifying campaigns, 9 distinct tactical identities, and, crucially, a format that guarantees no African team faces another African team in the group stage, removing the early eliminations that used to cancel each other out. So what have these 9 teams actually done with the opportunity?
Start with Morocco, the standard bearer. The Atlas Lions arrived in North America not as underdogs, but genuine contenders, and they have played like it. 7 goals through the group stage, the most productive attacking output of any African side at this tournament, built on a spine that Qatar 2022 made famous: disciplined defensive shape, patient build-up through midfield, and ruthless transitions in behind. Their 1-1 draw with Brazil in East Rutherford wasn't a fluke result against a tired 5-time champion. Morocco dictated long stretches of that match. And unlike in 2022, this is a squad with 0 defeats through the group phase. When Moroccan supporter Mustafa Shlia told reporters before kickoff that his team had come to America for the title, not to be underdogs, it read as confidence bordering on arrogance. After 90 minutes against Brazil, it read as prophecy. Then there's Egypt, and specifically Mohamed Salah, who has spent a decade being one of the greatest players to never win a World Cup match. That changed against New Zealand, a commanding 3-1 victory in Group G, where Salah scored and set up another, delivering Egypt's first ever World Cup win. Not their first win of the tournament, their first win in the history of the competition. Think about that. One of Africa's most storied football nations, back at a World Cup for the first time since 2018, had never once tasted victory on this stage before that afternoon. Now they're firmly alive in the race for the knockouts, and Salah, 33 years old, playing in what may be his last World Cup, finally has the moment his career always deserved. Côte d'Ivoire's story has been more painful but no less compelling. Coach Emeris Faye made one of the boldest squad decisions of the entire tournament, leaving proven names like Sebastian Haller and Wilfried Zaha at home in favor of unproven talent. Elie Wahi and Ange Yohan Boni entered the World Cup with a single senior cap between them. Against Germany, the gamble nearly paid off spectacularly. Franck Kessié gave the Elephants an early lead, and for long stretches, Côte d'Ivoire looked capable of the upset. But Germany's experience told in the final 20 minutes, and a 2-1 defeat leaves Faye's young side needing a positive result in their final group match to keep the dream alive. It's a reminder that boldness in squad building comes with risk, but also that this Ivorian generation, even in defeat, is producing performances that suggest the next cycle belongs to them. Ghana, meanwhile, delivered one of the purest late drama moments of the group stage. Against Panama in Toronto, the match looked destined for a draw until the 5th minute of stoppage time, when young midfielder Caleb Urenki found the net to snatch all 3 points. It's the kind of goal that changes a tournament's entire emotional trajectory. Ghana's talisman, Antoine Semenyo, called it proof that Ghana's World Cup journey is only beginning. And with England still to come, the Black Stars now carry momentum into the match that could define their group.
South Africa's campaign has been built on resilience rather than dominance. Facing the Czech Republic, Bafana looked headed for their first defeat until Teboho Mokoena stepped up in the closing stages and converted a penalty to snatch a 1-1 draw, keeping South Africa's knockout hopes breathing. It's not the electric, headline-grabbing football of Morocco or Cape Verde. It's grinding, fighting football, the kind that has kept South Africa alive when the margins were razor-thin. And then there's the story underneath the story. Tunisia's tournament ending early with a heavy 4-0 defeat to Japan, a reminder that expansion and opportunity don't guarantee results. Not every African campaign has been a fairy tale. Algeria walked into the tournament already managing a goalkeeping crisis after first-choice Luka Zidane broke his jaw in training, forcing him to debut a full-face mask just to be available. These are the margins that separate a group stage exit from a knockout run, an injury, a red card, a missed chance in the 89th minute. What ties all of these storylines together is tactical evolution. The African teams of the 1990s and 2000s were frequently characterized, sometimes unfairly, sometimes accurately, as sides built on individual brilliance and raw athleticism, with defensive organization as the weak link. That characterization does not survive contact with this tournament. Morocco's low block and rapid transitions, Cape Verde's disciplined backline, organized specifically to neutralize superior individual talent through structure rather than chaos. Egypt's patient build-up finding Salah in space rather than simply hoping he creates something from nothing. This is coaching. This is preparation. This is a continent that has spent the years since Qatar 2022 professionalizing its footballing infrastructure, and the results are showing up in real time on the biggest stage in the sport. There's also the diaspora factor, which deserves real attention rather than a footnote. Roughly half of Cape Verde's World Cup squad was born outside the country, developed in academies across Europe before choosing to represent their ancestral homeland. It's not a shortcut, it's a strategic advantage that reflects decades of African migration and footballing investment converging into elite talent pools that a nation of 500,000 people could never produce domestically. Ghana, Morocco, and Senegal have leaned on similar dynamics for years. What's different in 2026 is the scale and the coordination. Federations actively building relationships with diaspora talent years in advance, rather than reacting to breakout individual performances. Walk into any watch party from Casablanca to Paterson, New Jersey, and you'll feel it.
This tournament carries a different emotional charge for African communities than previous World Cups. In Paterson, hundreds of Moroccan supporters filled the streets for the Brazil match, flags draped over shoulders, drums keeping rhythm through 90 minutes of tension. In Houston, Cape Verdean fans who never imagined their tiny nation would play on this stage watched their team hold two-time champions to a draw with a mixture of disbelief and pure joy. This isn't just support. It's validation of a decades-long argument that African football belongs at the top table, not as a novelty act, but as a genuine tournament threat. So where does this leave the continent heading into the knockout rounds? Morocco enters the business end of the tournament unbeaten and playing with the swagger of a team that believes 2022 wasn't a ceiling, but a floor. Cape Verde has already rewritten what's possible for a football minnow and now gets to test that fairy tale against genuinely elite opposition in a knockout setting, where one mistake ends everything. Egypt carries Salah playing with the freedom of a man with nothing left to prove and everything left to win. Ghana carries stoppage-time magic and a date with England that could define their tournament. Côte d'Ivoire and South Africa are fighting for their tournament lives in final group matches where the margins are microscopic. And looming over all of it is the bigger picture. The next World Cup, in 2030, co-hosted by Morocco, will be the first ever staged on African soil since South Africa 2010. Everything happening right now, every goal, every draw, every heartbreak, is building the foundation for that moment. This generation isn't just playing for knockout qualification in North America, they're building the case in real time for what African football can become when the doors are finally, fully open. Roger Milla danced in 1990, Morocco reached the semifinal in 2022, and now, in 2026, 9 nations are writing the next chapter simultaneously. Not one African miracle, but a continental movement unfolding across 3 countries and dozens of matches, live in front of the entire footballing world. The question isn't whether Africa belongs at this level anymore. That debate is over. The question now is which of these 9 teams goes the furthest, and whether this is the tournament where an African nation finally reaches a final. So tell me, which African team do you think has the strongest path through the knockout stage from here? Was Côte d'Ivoire's bold, youth-heavy squad selection a mistake or a gamble that will pay off in the years to come? And do you believe this is the World Cup where an African nation finally reaches a final?